Sometimes myths aren't just imagination, they're memories. Carved into stone, whispered through generations, and hidden in the ruins of forgotten worlds. And among those myths stand the giants, beings of impossible size, cursed power, and stories that refuse to die. Tonight, we're bringing 7 of them back to life. The question is, were they ever just legends or echoes of something the world has tried to forget? Sometimes the strangest stories don't come from horror novels or Hollywood, they come from the Bible itself. In the book of Genesis, we meet one of the most unsettling mysteries ever written, the Nephilim. The text describes them as giants, the fallen ones, offspring of divine beings and mortal women, not quite human, not quite angel, something in between. Legends say they were towering warriors, violent and unstoppable, so dangerous that some believe the Great Flood itself was sent to erase them. And yet, the Nephilim refused to vanish. In recent years, they've crept back into pop culture, from Noah, 2014, where colossal stone giants rise from the earth, to Supernatural and The Witcher, echoing the myth of beings too powerful to be human. But here's the haunting part. Scattered through history are claims of giant bones unearthed in North America and ancient carvings in the Middle East that look eerily like massive humanoid figures. Science has called most of these hoaxes or mistakes. Still, the legend lingers. So what are the Nephilim? A metaphor for mankind's corruption or a reminder of something ancient that might still be waiting in the shadows? The Nephilim may have been giants born of gods and men, but the Greeks, they dreamed up something far stranger. Not just tall, but terrifying, the Cyclops. You've definitely seen their shadow in modern films. Remember Percy Jackson, or even Wrath of the Titans. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you know how often these kinds of movie creatures actually trace back to myths that are way older than Hollywood itself. But here's the twist. In the ancient stories, Cyclopes weren't just dumb beasts. Some were brutal man-eaters, sure, but others were legendary craftsmen. They were the ones who forged Zeus's lightning bolts. Imagine that, a one-eyed giant hammering out weapons for the king of the gods. Now, was there ever proof of such a creature? Here's where it gets weird. Some historians think the myth started when ancient Greeks dug up massive elephant skulls. Right in the center of the skull was a hollow opening, the nasal cavity. But to an untrained eye, it looked exactly like a single giant eye socket. If you stumbled on that 3,000 years ago, what would you think? Probably not elephant. You'd think monster. So, are Cyclopes real? Scientifically, probably not. But in a way, these myths may have been ancient people's way of explaining the unexplainable, and that's what makes them so fascinating. Now, we've talked about giants from the Bible and from Greece, but England has its own terrifying legend. A giant so brutal, even the heroes of myth struggled against him. His name was Gogmagog. According to English folklore, Gogmagog was a towering giant said to roam the land when Britain was first being settled. He wasn't just tall, he was savage. The stories say he had incredible strength, tearing up trees and hurling boulders as if they were pebbles. But here's where the story gets legendary. Gogmagog supposedly fought Coroneus, one of the companions of Brutus of Troy, the mythical founder of Britain. During their battle, Gogmagog ripped trees from the ground to use as weapons. But Coroneus, smaller yet faster, managed to grab the giant, drag him to a cliff, and hurl him into the sea. That clash, man versus monster, was said to mark the very birth of Britain's mythology. And if you've ever walked through London, you might have seen their shadows still standing. Statues of Gog and Magog guard the Guildhall, symbols of London's ancient power. They're not just decorations, they're reminders of a story that refuses to die. So, was Gogmagog ever real? Some believe these tales might have grown out of early encounters with massive ancient skeletons or exaggerated memories of fierce warrior tribes. Others say he's purely symbolic, a giant embodying the dangers Britain's founders had to overcome. Either way, the legend stuck. From medieval chronicles to modern festivals, Gogmagog lives on, not just as a story, but as part of England's very identity. Legends say there once was a giant so feared that even his own people whispered his name in terror. A monstrous king with a single eye, an eye that could kill armies with just one look. This was Balor. ruler of the Fomorians in Irish mythology. He wasn't a giant you fought with swords and shields. His weapon was his gaze. The moment that cursed eye opened, it was like unleashing fire itself. Whole battlefields reduced to nothing. If that sounds familiar, it should. You've seen versions of this in modern fantasy, Sauron's burning eye in The Lord of the Rings, or even the deadly gaze of Medusa. But Balor's story predates them all, born from the old Celtic nightmares of Ireland. The most famous tale puts him at the Battle of Mag Tuired, facing the Tuatha De Danann, the bright gods of Ireland. But Balor carried a prophecy that one day his own grandson would kill him, and like all great myths, fate couldn't be outrun. Lug, his grandson, brought him down with a single strike, a slingshot straight through that cursed eye. So was Balor real? Of course, no giant with a death eye ever stalked the earth. But some believe these stories carried fragments of truth. Maybe fears of sea raiders, maybe memories of strange diseases that left eyes swollen and monstrous. Myths don't need to be literal to feel real, and Balor's shadow still hangs over Ireland as one of its darkest giants. Balor didn't have a phone, but you do. If you're enjoying these legends, hit that like button and subscribe to Lostopedia. It helps keep myths like this alive, so we can keep diving deeper into the creatures that haunted our ancestors' imaginations. If Balor's eye could burn battlefields, the next giant didn't need a weapon at all. His burden was far heavier. He carried the weight of the heavens themselves. This was Atlas, one of the titans in Greek mythology. You've probably seen him 100 times even without realizing it. Statues, movies, even logos, showing a massive figure straining under the globe. But here's the twist. In the original myths, Atlas didn't hold the earth. He held up the sky. That endless dome above us was his eternal punishment after the Titans lost their war against the Olympian gods. Hollywood hasn't forgotten him either. Think of Percy Jackson, Sea of Monsters, or even the echoes of Atlas in superhero films. Where any character who takes on the impossible weight, you're seeing that myth ripple through time. But why invent a story like this? Some say Atlas was more than a character. He was a symbol. To the Greeks, the horizon itself, the edge of the known world near the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, might have inspired the idea of a giant literally holding up the heavens. Was Atlas real? Not in the flesh and blood sense, but his myth captures something human, the struggle of carrying what feels unbearable, the punishment of endless weight. That's why the name still lives on today, from mountains to maps to metaphors. And if you've been following Lostopedia for a while, you know how often these ancient myths don't just vanish, they evolve, reshaping into the stories and symbols we still use thousands of years later. If Atlas was punished to carry the sky, the Greeks imagined other giants so terrifying that even the gods feared them. These were the Hecatoncheires. The 100-handed ones. Picture this. Each one had 50 heads and 100 arms. Not graceful, not noble, pure chaos given flesh. They weren't meant to inspire statues or symbols. They were living weapons. In the myths, 3 brothers were born: Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges. At first, their own father, Uranus, locked them away, horrified by their size and power. But later, when the Olympians went to war against the Titans, Zeus unleashed them. With 100 arms hurling boulders and 100 hands gripping weapons, the Hecatoncheires tipped the balance. The gods won because these monsters fought beside them. Now, if you're into movies and anime, you've definitely seen their shadows. Multi-armed giants in Attack on Titan-style shows, or chaotic behemoths in fantasy films. That idea of something with too many limbs to fight against all at once, that comes straight from these myths. But could such a creature ever be real? Scientifically, no. Nature doesn't make 50-headed giants, yet myths like this may have been ways of imagining unstoppable natural forces, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, the kind of destruction no human army could stand against. The Greeks gave that chaos a face, and it wasn't pretty. And now, we've reached the last creature in our list, a giant unlike the others, not remembered for terror, but for his mark on the stars. This is Orion. In Greek mythology, Orion was a mighty hunter. Some stories say he was so tall he could walk across the sea with his head still above the waves. Others paint him as a tragic figure, chasing love and pride until the gods struck him down. But here's the twist. Orion didn't vanish into the underworld like so many other giants. The gods placed him in the heavens. Look up on a clear night, and you'll see him still, one of the brightest constellations in the sky, his belt of 3 stars pointing the way. Orion's story has shifted across time. To the Greeks, he was the huntsman. To sailors, a guide across the dark oceans. To stargazers today, a reminder of how myths never really die. They just change shape. Is he real? No giant hunter ever walked across the sea. But in a sense, Orion is more real than any myth we've covered tonight. Because unlike the others, he's still there, every night, watching us from the sky. And that's the beauty of these legends. Some monsters vanish into dust, others stay alive through stories. But a few, like Orion, become immortal. You made it all the way here. That tells me something. You're not just watching for fun. You're the kind of person who looks deeper, who wants to see how all these myths connect. And here's the thing, not every legend is about giants. Some come from the oceans themselves. So if this video sparks something in you, you have to see 12 sea monsters that refuse to die. It's right here on screen, or tap the eye at the top, because once you watch, you'll realize the myths don't just walk on land, some still swim in the depths. Already seen it? Then jump to 9 most dangerous movie beasts of all time, because sometimes Hollywood's monsters reveal truths older than we think. So thank you for staying till the very end. Most people don't, but you're different, and that's exactly why Lostopedia exists.